you're gonna try again. Okay. Sure. Yeah, there's quite a bit of those. There's quite a few of those that we have already answered, pretty much.
Morning, ladies. I just want to make sure
We're live. Curt?
Oh, sorry. I was waiting for you to give me the instructions. So I get to go now? Do I get to start? Do I talk?
We've been through this, what, like 6 or 7 times already? I thought you already know what to do after I
Yeah,
tell 3, 2, 1.
I was reading the questions.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Hi, this is Francis Martin and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. This is our every other Friday Q&A session, office hours. where you write in questions and we answer them. Usually the process is that Francis reads the question. Martin is usually given the correct answer. I mean, he always gives the correct answer. And then I add my take on it. The answer in the comment section on the video below, you can see the link to add your questions. We're kind of impressed at the quality of the questions we've been getting. They've definitely increased in quality over time. Martin, and then I said recently that a lot of them are the topics have begun to be recurring. And I think that's natural. We should expect to see that the topics are recurrent. What I was wondering is now that we've started testing breaking these long sessions into shorts. In other words, well, relatively shorts, because I think our average answer is 20 to 40 minutes or something like that.
30 minutes on average, and I've noticed a pattern. The first question, we always end up talking about some more, and then we start picking up the pace.
Okay. And so what I expect will happen is that we will develop little lists of topics of similar, right? Videos of similar questions. That's what I suspect will happen. Anyway, I just ran a bunch of them through to see how hard it was to break them up, and it's not at all. It's relatively easy. You just you do it right in the YouTube video editor, so you don't even have to download the thing and go through all the rendering time. So, all right. So that said, good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm okay.
You're
and
okay?
It's not morning here.
It's what?
It's not morning.
I know. It's morning over here. All right. Let's give it a shot.
All right. So question 1. I've observed that most traits in any given person are mostly genetic. Roughly 80%, if I'm remembering correctly, meaning that most environmental interventions, at least how they are practiced now, either mediate over time or are ineffective. With that being said, however, what social or environmental interventions are effective in changing the outwardly demonstrated behavior or social traits of a population, assuming there are some that can or are effective in the first place?
The most obviously effective environmental interventions will be the ones that change selection pressure on the next generation, but I understand that is not what we're asking. What's going to change the outcomes for individuals is ensuring that they have a healthy diet, maintain their physique, have some useful skills, socialize with different types of people, learn how to seduce the opposite sex, learn to cooperate as part of the team, operate in diverse places in hierarchies, and develop capacity for responsibility. Throughout most of history, most of these would just be normal parts of life, but we're living in the most insane age so far. So these things need to be checked.
How does Luke say? The most
We forgot how to
removed
be
from
human.
natural consequences?
From nature's feedback, yes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, Martin, that was a brilliant answer. Is that why we keep you around?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I actually didn't understand the question at first. There's two things. There's a couple of assertions here that I'd clarify. Yeah, you say most traits in any given person are mostly generic.
Genetic.
Genetic. Yes. Yes, 80%. Okay, that's what it is. That's what I misunderstood. So 80%, yeah, it seems to be, the psychology used to say flip it around, but the reality has come to roost. So it's about 80%. And while they like us to say the rest is nurture, it's not. It's idiosyncratic experience. And this comes down to you basically, you can make life easier on your kids, and you can by giving them good disciplines, and you can fuck them up a lot, but eventually their traits will express. What's the second time? The second one is that most, meaning that most environmental interventions, they're mediator. I'm not sure what that means. I would say that the second thing is that the reason we develop religions and traditions and norms and values, meaning informal and formal institutions, everything from myths and histories down to how our manners and mode of dress, is an attempt to create regularity and the illusion of regularity. And so, and this is what regularity produces: a discount on cognition for humans. So we're all working together to produce a discount on cognition so that we can devote our efforts to uh, self-reward within that predictable environment. In other words, it's hard to obtain rewards in an unpredictable environment, and it's easier in a predictable environment. Therefore, the problem is creating a predictable enough environment that people can still adapt and innovate and seek and find satisfaction, versus an set of predictable environment that constrains the individual from innovation, experimentation, all the things that Martin said below in his answer. So there's your genetics, there's your environment. In other words, the regularities that you have been born into, and then the last one is the results of your idiosyncratic experiences given those genetic and cultural constraints. So so uh, those are the factors that tend to generate human behavior that tends toward marginal indifference. In other words, you're observing that most traits are mostly genetic, yes, but there's something else here, which is people tend toward marginal indifference uh, within the limits of their ability to make use of that marginal indifference. All right, so that's why people in cultures act the same. People in different cultures act according to their culture. What was the last bit here? What that being said, however, what social environment interventions? So the interventions that matter, Martin's correct everywhere here. Is he's saying Martin answered, what can we teach you, which is correct, and I would add that what can we incentivize you with, positively and negatively. So you can, as strange as it is, you can implement laws, regulations, legislation that changes behavior relatively quickly in a population over, say, a 8 to 10 year period, as it percolates, as the change percolates through the population. You can do that as long as it's a rational incentive. If it's an irrational incentive telling you to do something that's against your interest, it won't be sticky. It won't succeed. Anyway, so yes, that I think those are the factors, those are the dimensions I would say fall into this. Is there anything we should address there, Francis? Or
Well, I'm thinking how much does how do you put it, the regulations, uh, okay, the social environmental interactions, to the extent that they regulate expression of the genes, how much does that over generations gets passed down in the genome? Otherwise, well, keeping in mind
wait,
that
how much what gets passed on in the genome?
how much
Only
that behavior actually gets encoded into the genome versus just outward expression.
none of it.
None of it.
Only insofar it alters who breeds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see. So that's actually the primary motivating factor. The primary effective vector. It's in the selection of the subject that gets to breed and pass down their genes, and not so much of the modification of behavior themselves.
No, the big example, the common example we use is that, and I can't remember who said this. It's probably, I can't remember his name right now. It's escaping me. God, French.
What's it about?
French.
Lamarck?
Say it again, Martin.
Lamarck?
No, who's the French guy who does the history of the family in Europe? The history of the, I can't remember. He says that you can tell you can tell from a family's ethical differences, moral differences, what crop their ancestors raised in the medieval era, and this turns out to be true. But that's not a factor. Is that a factor of epigenetics, or familial transfer? It appears to be almost entirely the result of familial transfer. There is some epigenetic, there is some epigenetic capacity to change, but I keep my fingers pretty deep in that discussion, and I still remain pretty skeptical.
Well, so what I've seen is basically all reset.
Yes, it's reset every time. So
Main role of epigenetics is ensuring that different cells in our bodies actually have different functions and don't express the same genetics.
Yep. Martin's very good at this also. I should not just say it's just me. All right, so that's my answer to that. Is that, and it's a great question. I'm sorry I misread the first term, but it's a great question.
All right, shall we move to question 2?
Mm-hmm.
Question 2. What's the NLI's official stance on whatifalthist testimony of the existence of the spiritual world? Spirit world. He has recently claimed to be a practicing mystic, publicly testifying that he has accessed this spirit world / dimension and claims exclusive knowledge of its workings over anyone that has not accessed this mysterious world. These statements position him as more of a huckster priest versus an objective analyzer. How does an NLI reconcile its association with someone who makes this claim while maintaining its posture of it being an organization that maximizes scientific testimony?
Oh, we've answered this on July 19th already. Should I just reference previous answer, or should I answer it again every time?
You asking me?
Or Francis, whoever.
I think you should just make your statement that that you think is the correct answer. If that's the right answer, way to do it, let's go ahead.
Well, I said something along the lines that there are emergent, stable relations, and that includes something that primitive materialists disregard as woo, that group strategies have some correspondence to spirits, you could say.
Yes.
The spirit world certainly doesn't exist in the sense that Rudyard claims. I'll only add that he is in no way associated with Institute as a whole. He's a friend of Curt. He was a guest speaker at a single conference, and to my knowledge, he's demonstrated taking on board a very limited amount of the work and doesn't interact with the rest of the fellows.
Yeah, Martin's right as usual. So think of it this way: I invest in a lot of people, right? And I believed he had a promise, but I saw that he was at risk. And so for the past couple of years, I've been trying to protect him and advise him as much as I can. Obviously, I failed in this instance. Um, I think you're overacting. What I would suspect is you're probably overacting because there are plenty of people who are fundamentalists in one way or another. And there is a group of people who have done a lot of hallucinogens. In his case, it's ayahuasca. That probably take it too far. In other words, they attribute too much reality to the experience, and there are reasons why different people do such things. His reasons are probably obvious. So I care about this guy. He's a friend. I consider myself a mentor and advisor. I tried to prevent this behavior. So did everyone else on his team, and we could not stop it. I know why it happened. I know the danger of mixing video and hallucinogens. um, but we've got him off of that, so that's not gonna happen again. He'll stay off the subject. Um, you can't. I don't. There's a tendency on the right for us to want perfection from everything, and this is what I call virtue spiraling. We sort of want, you get every faction thinks it's absolutely right and correct and got the best answer. Well, the truth is that most factions have some part of an answer, and that includes the religious and the spiritual factions. They have some part of some particular insider answer. But on the right, we tend to purity spiral. I don't sort of do that. It's like my grandmother said, Curt. If you are too picky about your friends, you won't have any. And so I look at it the same way. If I was too picky about people I tried to mentor, I wouldn't mentor anyone. And so I just say, the guy took a swing. He's taken a couple of swings. His swings at philosophy, I feel, have been a failure, and his swings at theological or spiritual, have been a failure. But his swings at history and anthropology have hit it out of the park. So, do I want to discount the incredible work he's done at such a young age in his comparative civilization? Or do I discount him because the things that he's tried outside of his field of expertise have been failures? Well, I would hope that I would accept the good parts of people and ignore the fragile or failed parts of people. And I think that's what we should all do, rather than purity spiral. If you do that, what you're really saying is that you're weak, and when you purity spiral, and you have to have other people completely agree with you because you don't know how to compromise and cooperate with others towards shared ends despite your differences. So I see it quite the opposite way that the purists do, although I understand that as conservatives, our role is to be the white blood cells, right? Our job is to seek out the impurities and the disgust factors and to stop them, whether they be physical, verbal, intellectual, or spiritual. And so it's not that you're not doing your job. It's that once you've looked at a problem, have you really discovered that you should throw the baby out with the bathwater, or is someone's minor divergence a problem? I'm going to bring up just a couple of people. I'll bring up one because, again, I know Richard. Richard Spencer sort of burned himself on the pyre, right? But I don't look at it like that. I look at it as he tried, right? There's a couple of other guys out there of similar. They've burned themselves, but they tried. Now, I would rather people try and fail than not try at all. I would rather that lots of us try and fail, because eventually somebody will try and succeed. And what's more likely to happen is that if hundreds of us try, and we all and out of that, just a few of us succeed at something, then the some things we succeed at can be brought together and turned into a strategy that succeeds for all of us. So I'm not really into this whole punch right. Rudyard's got his issues, like we all have our issues. He's a little too transparent about it, and so we've tried to counsel him to stay in his professional capacity and not look for agreement, sympathy, and understanding from a public who would need very similar experiences. Now, if you do read those comments, you see, wow, I got a lot out of this, because I've had some other. So there's a lot of positive feedback in there as well. But, you have to have had the same traumatic experience or similar traumatic experiences or differences in order to resonate with the way he's saying it. And he and I know because I talked to him at a time, he overestimated how many people would have that experience. And so anyway, I just say, the episode is over. He's moved on. He won't do that again, and whatever. And as for so it's not an institute association. It's my association looking for talent out there that we can influence to make it better than it has been. And I'm talking about this guy because he references our work now and then. He does make use of some of it. As Martin says, it's not a lot. That's because really it's not. It's the level of analysis we work at is not useful or in his domain. But it's not like I don't talk to a lot of the other guys who are somewhere on the spectrum of the right and give them advice and counsel or warning. Most of the time I say something along the lines of, the science doesn't actually say that, and you might want to not press that argument so hard. That's usually the kind of stuff I say to people. And, I have these back channel conversations with them. So does Brandon. So it's not like this is the only guy we invest in. It's just whatever. So that's my feedback on it. What's next?
All right. Question 3. Excuse me. What's Curt's view on accelerationism, the idea that calls for the drastic intensification of capitalist growth, technological change, infrastructure sabotage, and other processes of social change to destabilize existing systems and create radical social transformations?
Yeah, I'm surprised Martin didn't answer this.
Because it's about your view.
Yes.
Can we have your view first, though? Would that be all right? Because I'm pretty sure it's the right view.
Well, I'm against it. And mostly seek to return what worked in the past and get rid of all the mismatches that are between people and their environments.
Oh, wait. Oh, I think Curt froze.
Yeah.
Whoops. This has never happened before. Give me 1 sec. Okay, so I guess he's rejoining. I'll say something after. Oh, there you are.
I got booted.
You got booted.
Yeah, I'm sure it's out here in the provinces. We don't exactly have the most stable internet connections.
Yeah, it just appears from our end that you froze. What was the last part you heard?
Martin was just about to say something, and that's all I got.
I just have to say that I'm against it and that I rather seek a return to the past that worked. Actually match human nature to their environment and create a system around that.
Yes, I think, I think that the way I look at I'm sort of working with one other guy's view of progressive, the progressive right, which is I feel that we have learned a lot during since the Industrial Revolution, and certainly during the 20th, 21st centuries, and we've learned that you can take alienation to the point, or there's disassociation, um, and reliance on the internet to the point where you've created behavioral incompetence. And so, which of course Luke specializes in. But my view is that accelerationism is cope. It's an admission you don't know how to solve the problem. And it's also a kind of arrogance that I blame on the progressives, which is assuming you know what to do. And so I prefer incremental evolution by not by the positive attempt to achieve something, but by the elimination of bads, errors, and bads and falsehoods. So I would say acceleration is just another form of right wing imitation of the early 20th century progressives, and that having some belief that you know what to do when, in other words, what positive to shoot for, rather than just increasing your success at removing the negatives and letting the positive emerge from that, rather than assuming that you're some fucking genius that you know what to bring about. Obviously, what I'm going to agree with Martin and with Luke and with the Institute position as a whole, which is uh, that it's a particular vanity to believe in that we can uh, do anything other than incremental evolution on one hand, and incremental suppression of the bads and falsehoods on the other. So one of the questions we would have today is, are we going to successfully adapt to this information system we call social media and the internet? Or is it going to continue to cause behavioral decline? I suspect, and I can see this already, that we're going to have we've had our Edwardian era of license, and we're going to have our Victorian era of conservatism as a response. I suspect that's what's going to happen. And so, and I can see evidence of it. Uh, the reason I the reason I distributed a video the other day of a guy who works in fashion is because he was saying the same thing, because that's the pattern that happens in history. And I like that example because it's a disconnect from the usual uh, diatribes that go on online. It shows who a guy who's really working empirically with with uh, un, unconscious judgments about the world, and how conservative dress is becoming restored. So, and it'll restore like usual at the top and work its way down, which is, names work their way down, dress works its way down, all sorts of signaling works its way down through the classes. So I'm not. If you and the acceleration I would look at is, do we need to move a revolution forward in order to accomplish our prevent the harm that was happening until recently? That I would see that as an acceleration, because that's an acceleration in the prevention of a harm. It's not a theory about a good. And so again, and we talk about via negativas all the time. Go ahead, Mark.
Wouldn't be acceleration not a total change in direction?
Yes. It's well, good. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great.
Acceleration is just the magnitude of the vector. The direction, I think, makes it that it's far more important that we march in the right direction versus which direction we're going. I think people who, those, especially those on the right, who aim for acceleration, assumes that the direction of the acceleration is the one that we want, and I'm just not totally convinced of it. And especially given that these things don't go just in a straight and narrow. When you accelerate the pace of things happening, there are many things. Think of it as more of a tree traversal or graph traversal in a sense, right? When you have less time, because acceleration necessarily means that you have less time to adapt at every branch.
Yes.
And when you have less time to adapt at every branch and falsify all the other answers, you should randomly pick a path, you actually increase the probability of hitting a bad outcome, because the vast majority of outcomes they're bad.
Yes. Well, that was actually an interesting set of answers. I liked all three of us having something to say about that. That was interesting.
It's just it's kind of fun. I mean, not funny, but it's kind of interesting how things work. You have stable relationships which are far and fewer compared to all the other possibilities out there.
Yes.
And by nature, things tend to become more chaotic, higher entropy. And to maintain order, you actually need it's the straight and narrow.
Correct.
And so it's the straight and narrow in the field of vast field of chaotic outcomes.
Right. So I'll just say it again. That was beautiful. I want to reemphasize, the best thing you can always do is eliminate bads, and then that's most of the time. The other one is, because the next question might break on this, is that there are times when you're behind and somebody already has the answer. So if you're like the communists and you want to rapidly industrialize, that's a different thing. But when you're at the front of the pack and you think you want to solve some great social problem by coming up with an ideal or some utopianism or some fantasy, you're generating those unstable relations. You're not creating stable relations from which persistent.
Maybe you're not even correctly identifying the problem.
Correct. So I would say that's a pretty, I always say, they always blame conservatives and progressives, but the difference is that conservatism is basically empirical, and progressivism is basically utopian. And so I just don't like. The record of utopians is really fucking bad. So let's just and it's basically an admission of failure. When you get into something utopian, you're admitting that you don't know what to do to suppress the bads of the current era that could give birth, that could create, and in doing so, create the infrastructure necessary for the birth of whatever goods might be accessible in the if we do suppress the bads. So I just view it as I actually view progressiveness as childishness.
The record of conservatives isn't much better because they don't actually conserve anything.
Yeah, my view is that we call it conservative, but it's actually reactionary, right?
Yeah.
And reactionary tends to produce ideals just as bad as progressives.
No, it's just return to something that already works for the most part.
Well, but again,
I said earlier,
that works. The problem I have, Martin, with this is that it's really clear that we're transitioning from the agrarian age to something else, right? We're going through a lot of stages really quickly, and I'm not confident that our view of history, tradition, and whatever that evolved during this long agrarian age, which is really the entirety of history, our known history. I'm not confident that those things all survive in the future. In other words, are we having an incremental improvement of the agrarian age, or are we more likely having a change that's akin to the hunter-gatherer to the agrarian age? And I suspect it's more of the latter. And so that's why I'm saying is that when you look, I would say there's things we know about humans from the evidence of the past, but does that mean the institutions that we've built to work together, etc., in the past are going to succeed in the future because the incentives are different? And I'm not I'm not saying I have a very high standard of confidence in these things, and so I'm not confident that we can say we can move to the past as much as I am. We worked with we know what succeeded in the past, and we know what's failed due to this utopian nonsense. And so we need to look at what's succeeded in the past, what can be kept, what seems like it needs to be kept for us to survive, right? And then what is less necessary. The things I'm thinking about particularly is marriage, because I don't know how you get a healthy kid without a marriage, without, in other words, high investment parenting. I just don't know how it happens. And so I don't know how you get civilization without the first institution being the family, not the individual, which is what the left and the right both seem to have been doing. It's not the individual, it's the family and the high investment parenting. I don't see how we get there, despite the fact that the incentives seem to be against getting married. Even if we change the law so that we're not quite as victimized by the folly of women, even if we change that law, I'm not confident that the family will stay as it was through 1963, and instead it won't devolve back into the historical tradition, which is serial monogamy for the lower classes and monogamy for the upper. I'm just not confident that's going to happen. Even then, I'm not confident about that. So can you comment on that, Martin? Because I don't want to, I'm not sure I'm right.
I would say that we should definitely look at what remained the same between hunter-gatherers and agrarianism. That's probably still gonna stay the same.
Yeah.
Otherwise, finding the stable relationships that did work.
Yeah, the problem is stable relationships at small scale are much easier than stable relationships at large scale. At some point you need institutions. It's in the beginning you only need habits and traditions. Eventually you need informal institutions, and then you need formal institutions, right? And then you need people. You need institutions, informal and formal, to help people work within the institutional frameworks you've created. So it's we're sort of engineering this edifice that's trying to create enough regularity that people can succeed in life without limiting them to, as Islam does, to any success in life. So I mean, I think it's a harder. I think it's a harder problem, and I'm not sure we did a very good job in the 20th. We seem to have done a pretty bad job actually of this migration, and we don't seem to be doing very well in the 21st century. And I think Martin is probably right that we're going to go back to more traditional and then try to work our way out of it. Because I don't, we can propose our reforms are really just that. We're saying because I went through my book, the old one, the old version, which goes through all the reforms that would be necessary. I went through that yesterday looking for something. And I mean, we've covered fucking every dimension not in the Constitution that's online, but at least in our outlines, we've covered everything. And if you look at how we're going through it, we're more like doing what Martin just said, which is saying these things work because we need them, right? We have to pay for these institutions habitually and normatively to get them. But all this fucking magical thinking that came up during the 20th, whether it's in physics or economics or psychology or sociology or political science, it's all the result of the progressives era and the Marxist era working together to say that we can have utopia instead of we can have incremental evolution to whatever good is possible for us to make.
Well, most of that is a function of all our institutions being taken over by our enemies in the 20th century.
You actually, while you're talking about this, it made me realize that it's actually the fact that human technology have progressed so much in the last 200 years is in effect having detrimental effect on our ability to falsify the bad because because it's too fast for us to adapt, right? Before you can actually put institution or mass scale operating system in place, the technology has already moved on, and therefore we always have laws and legislation that lags the progress of technology. And now we're looking at things like, hey, we have the entire generation, just using one example, we have the entire generation that grew up on screens, not knowing how bad screens actually are for their mental health and everything. And now these people are screwed for the rest of their lives, and we don't know what to do. And then AI is coming up, and it may screw up the next generation before we can put a limiter on things. So if anything, I'm actually thinking our technology progress has outstripped our ability, both of our ability to genetically adapt as well as the ability for the institutions to adapt and put the limiters in place.
Yes.
So if anything, we need to slow down instead of speeding up. But there's no putting that genie back in the bottle at this point.
I would say, can I offer an alternative way of looking at that? Because your sense is great, but you're right. There's no way of putting the genie back in the bottle. I would say that we're telling the population what to do, which is you have to be more aggressive in your suppression of bads. In other words, the faster you evolve, the quickly you have to adapt to suppression of bad. And what's happened in the 20th is the opposite. We have all these incredibly bad things that happened, especially post-war, and certainly the whole civil rights thing was a nightmare. And so you look at this, what we've done. We haven't corrected that yet. No-fault divorce should have been corrected. We should have gotten rid of that already, right? All of this stuff is just a remnant of that progressive utopian thinking that there's endless growth, right? And that the Western advantage that would existed after the war would continue into infinity, and that's just crap. So I think that we're recommending at least half of the solution, which is we need to accelerate the rate at which evident bads are suppressed.
Oh, I see what you mean. Let's adopt a different framing. Rather than let's put the limiter on it, let's slow down, you're saying let's actually speed up our adaptation, especially elimination of the bads.
Speed up our elimination of bad. I mean, for example, who is it? Is it Australia that just put a limit on the age you can use social media? I think Australia. I don't know if they passed it or not, but I know the bill was being considered. That might be a thing. I mean, I'm kind of happy my kid can have a telephone where he can call me or message me or something, or I can call him and message him. I like that idea.
As long as it's a dumb phone.
As long as it's a dumb phone.
You know how hard it is to get a dumb phone these days?
Yeah, I know.
Like, I'm expecting them just to give me them out for like $1 each or something. It turns out you actually have to pay pretty good money for a fucking dumb phone. Even then, still have some smartphone functionality. Like, you install freaking app. No, I don't want that. I basically want a long-range walkie-talkie.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, the other half is Chesterton fans don't change what's working.
yeah,
Well, if you have a federation, then maybe you can try it in one or two fedons, provided
yeah,
population
yeah,
agrees with it. And then based on the results, maybe you can scale it up.
yeah. All right, I think we answered that one.
Oh, all right, cool. So, question 4. Martin, please make clear what you and the Natural Law Institute's opinion is regarding the National Socialists and why they would be superior to the alternatives.
Answer from October 25th. I see it as another managerial system. Granted, compared to communism and managerial liberalism, it comes off as the least bad of the three, seeing as it actually has interests of the nation instead of parasitic oligarchy as an end, and dictatorship is what it takes to fight the type of threat Germany was up against at the time. But over time, it is vulnerable to getting an error-prone or outright hostile management, and so at least my goal here is for our people to live in a non-managerial states that don't interfere in their lives. This doesn't mean some libertarian free market individualist utopia, it means many self-governing and within possibility self-sufficient intermediate institutions that state isn't allowed to dictate to. But new information I once suggest it may have been as viable as it was because international bankers supported it by lending at very low interest with the intent to crash it later, knowing Germany couldn't yet stand on its own, thus driving it to war. I still think it's as good a war regime. It's good as a war regime, but really in practice, all or converge towards the same form, even if they have different justifications.
I think Curt is you who said fascism is fastest in war.
Say again?
Fascism is fastest in war.
Yes. Martin said, I mean, Martin's, as usual, brilliant. The the point I would make is that the Romans had this figured out. You elect when you're at war, you have a dictator, and when you're at peace, you have a senate, right? And that seems to work phenomenally well. This idea that we can have a steady state, I don't know where this comes from, right? There's only one form, one operating model for a government. When it's just when what we say in the Constitution is that there are times of war, times of going concern, and times of windfall, and you make different. And the problem is being able to switch between them and not get stuck in one, because of course, if you go into a stage of windfall, like certainly like Athens did, Rome did, you create very bad fucking habits if it isn't, if it persists very long. Whereas if you have, you want to be in a going concern as long as possible, or as Martin said above, you want to, if you're in a state of authoritarianism, it'll just breed authoritarianism. This is a little bit like saying the reason we like federations is because the core state usually fucks up, and it does that. And since it fucks up, there's another core state that can emerge. Whereas in empires, if the empire fucks up, and that just means the whole fucking empire fucks up. So, I think it's one of those. It's Here's how I look at it. It is very hard to argue with nationalism, national religion, what their version of what they considered socialism, which was the production of commons, right? Not the redistribution. And you know what? People they loved it. So if they hadn't had to go into an expansionary war, I think they would have been heroes. So it's unfortunate that they had to do what they had to. They did what they felt they had to do, when I think that the political model is actually exceptional for war, and it can easily backtrack into going concern when it's not under duress. I actually think it was. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I mean, there's bad economics in there, but I mean, I mean, you're talking about the 1930s when we didn't know about. I don't think we really understood economics until the 2008 crash, because
Why do you say that?
because
Now, what did we understand?
we understood the idea. It was a very growth oriented model, and so the whole argument, and of course I'm from the Austrian school originally, is that the argument with that the new Keynesian, the Keynesians and new Keynesian made is that despite having these uh, heated periods and crashes, right? We were farther along than we would have if we did another way. And I'm like, that's a really nice way of saying you fucked a whole lot of people to get a marginal indifference at the top, which largely benefits the government. So what happened in 2008 is we learned you can't kick the can down the road. And so that ended the remaining dispute in economic theory, which was that the Keynes was originally saying, here's how you get out of a crisis. The next group of people said, this is how we accelerate growth. Right?
I see what you mean. Whereas Keynes has originally proposed this as a last-ditch solution to kickstart the economy, subsequent generations have taken that as a good, as a intrinsic good, and start applying it to even out the bumps. And it turns out that, hey, eventually you create enough moral hazard such that you lead things to even bigger blowups.
Right. That's
2008.
That's right. And they didn't do full accounting like we do. If they'd done full accounting, they would have measured the changes in capital, right? The capital being behavioral capital. But as you say, they created moral hazard. And so they created all these moral hazards that we're now going to have.
They've accumulated the entire human lifetime worth of moral hazard.
Correct.
And they're still kicking the can down the road.
Well, yeah, because nobody has the will in a democracy to change until you have no choice. So that's why I'd say, I mean, you look at the economists through 2009, how talky and how proud and how smart they said. And since then, they've gone silent. They don't say anything anymore. And why? Is because there's nothing to say, right? They were wrong. And so now that we know you can't kick it down the road, that they were dependent on endless growth, we're going to grow our way out of it. Sure, it's debt, but we'll grow our way out of it. You're going to grow your way out of it unless your women are cranking babies out like there's no tomorrow. That's the only way to grow out of it. Even then, you're not in the same position.
Even then, it's the question of which IQ distribution those babies came from.
Yeah, exactly. Or worse, that if you get a place like China that can use basically the fascist model, right, and the debt leverage model that you've invented, and you can sort of basically take over world manufacturing. Right now, you've lost the ability for your reproductive classes to reproduce, and so
China actually adopted the Japan model, and then you can see Japan as being 20, 30 years in advance of China, right? And so China is getting, probably already started their lost decade, i.e. Japan in 1990s. And it's exactly 30 years apart, because you look at Japan in 1960, and then they started getting to this lost decade, lost decades. In the 1990s, and China started in the 1990s, and now we're in 2020s.
Yep. So that all that crap, right? That began with the progressive era. This idea that we had I say that's the way I say it in the book is, there's the four laws, right? I mean, physical laws, behavioral laws, evolutionary laws, and the laws of logic, right? Logical laws, formal laws. And what did they do? They violated every one of them. They violated the physical law, which is scarcity, violated the behavioral law, which is rational self-interest, um, and of course we'll take over the genetic stuff in there as well. And they violated the evolutionary laws by consuming, pretending imagining there was going to be endless growth. What are they doing? They're just trying to hyper-consume. And so they brought out hyper-consumption into the polity because it was so rewarding. But Brad goes into this in the 1800s. I think if Martin spent time on the 1920s through 1950s, he would have a fucking field day with talking about the commercialization, right? How to make consumers drive growth, but when the real purpose of that growth is to fund the expansion of government. And so, this is another crisis. Why don't our kids know economic history? That's history, right? Everything else is ideology.
Because if they actually educated the kids, then they know they can't keep the charade going.
Right, exactly.
And growth in consumption in no way necessarily translate into growth as a people.
Correct.
Dimensions that matter.
As a matter of fact, as we've seen in the Spanish model in particular, it has the opposite effect. We've certainly seen it in America as having the opposite effect, and we've seen it in Europe as having the opposite effect, which is if you teach a people no longer to be temporarily responsible for capital, right, to hyperconsume, you'll actually destroy the traditions that they had, and they won't readopt them. They'll stay there. So if you look at what happened to Spain, it used to be a hard-working country.
Well, all that cheap New World gold have
Yeah.
spoiled them.
And what did they spend it on? They didn't spend it on universities and and that kind of, what did they spend it on? They spent it on a war against the Netherlands. What a fucking idiots. All right. Holy shit, what's the next question? It goes on
Yeah,
for
that one it's going to take me a minute to read. From Dan, please deliberate. My question may be a bit long, but seems like it should have a simple, fast answer. But that may not be the case.
Famous last words.
According to highly conflicting information online, the question is if IQ can be determined or approximately determined by translating an ASVAB score into an intelligence quotient, plus an end interpretation requested. Plus an end interpretation requested. Of course, the ASVAB is an acronym for the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, used to determine competency for military service and specific vocational areas for special strengths or weaknesses. Okay, so it sounds like Army version of IQ test. The subject matter is not strictly vocational in nature, but includes some of that. The test generally takes, or at least allows up to somewhere around 4 hours to complete, all the while being closely monitored by military personnel. It's not a whimsical thing to partake in. I find the following facts hard to believe, but a minimal passing ASVAB score is said to be in the 30s. An average score is around 50. Supposedly a 99 was the highest score ever achieved by very few of the best special forces guys. That is what is stated in online search results. I don't know what to believe on that. Another online site states to calculate IQ by doubling the VAB, then add 60 to get IQ. This makes zero sense to me. It cannot be accurate. Just a little bit.
I didn't get that. Give me that again.
So essentially, a translation like another online site states to calculate IQ, to translate between ASVAB score to IQ, you simply add, you double the VAB score, then add 60 to get IQ. So if you had, say, a 30, right, 30 times 2, you get 60, plus another 60, you get 120, which doesn't sound right. Because what the minimal passing score of the VSVAB is 30. Okay, the person then said, this makes zero sense to me. It cannot be accurate. Just a little bit more background, and please give an opinion. I had a buddy that tested with me, got a 47 on the ASVAB, very average standard, a very competent guy. My score was 96 first time around. The tester was very shocked and literally screamed my name, irately pointing a finger at me. You know how high testosterone, belligerent military guys are. Upon testing results saying that he thought I cheated or some kind of test code switching scam occurred. So he demanded I retake the damn 4-hour test again. It's not exactly enjoyable. Was ordered to retake it immediately after completing the first one. 8 solid hours of testing, only this time using a different test code and completely different question set. So upon seeing my second test score was 98 this time, he was nearly speechless. Is this score really that unusual? I'm not trying to be funny. It all happened just like that. I'm just confused about the significance of the test. Why were they making such a big deal about it? I always thought of myself as pretty normal. So, does the ASVAB translate to IQ? Any assessment of what this all means will be appreciated.
Yeah, it's a great question. But it's really quite simple, like you suspected. A score above 90 means you're in the upper 10%. That's not particularly high, really. It's all right. The second thing is that when you're taking an IQ test, they're really testing for how well you handle abstractions, right? They're looking for the abstraction capacity of it across these different pieces, but there's no vocational query in it. Whereas in the ASVAB, they're looking more for your vocational ability within the military. So while there's a correlation between the figures, in other words, you're going to be smarter if I'm not going to use a higher IQ. So if you're going to be smarter, you're going to test out better in both systems. Getting a 140 in an IQ test is really hard, but I mean you're not going to get a 140 on an ASVAB test because they don't really test that end of the spectrum. So I don't see it as I don't see it as comparing apples to oranges. About 1 in 10 people gets a score over 90, and about it's like 1 in 20 gets a score up there like you did. I mean, maybe 1 in 30 or 40. It's not that hard. It's not like getting a 130 or 140 score or higher score in an IQ test. So it's better at saying the military needs people, and I'm not hitting a salient point here, and that's that there's a little more correlation on the ASVAB with real world understanding. So whereas there's a little more correlation in the IQ test for abstract understanding. And so I would expect a smart guy like you ask questions like this to get a higher score on the ASVAB, but I don't believe there's an equivalent there that compares to the IQ test, at least at the high end. So they're really looking for, can you fit into the military? Can you do and what occupation can you do within it? But they're testing for both cognitive and vocational skills, whereas the IQ test is not really It's testing what it says. It's testing for G. Let's see if I can find anything real quick here that I can use for clarification, but I don't see anything else in the criteria for an ASVAB. So your question. So what's your question? Is this score unusual? It's not. It's probably unusual for the military, right? But it's not as unusual as say a 140 on an IQ test. You're not trying to be funny. What's the significance of the test? It's like you could make a test like this, a cognitive test, suit different domains. So what's the significance of the test? If you got a 90-80 on an ASVAB, you're not a fucking idiot, that's for sure. How does it translate to IQ? There's no way to tell. All you can say is that just like IQ is composed of, let's say 40 or 80 different properties that they're testing, right? They tend to scale together, with the primary difference being verbal pictorial versus spatial temporal, right? That's the primary difference you're going to see, and that's going to come down to what they usually give you the two scores. But intelligence tends to scale equally with a certain bias one way or the other. And I think that, if you're a pretty smart fellow, that's great. But you'd have to take an IQ test to see what your IQ is. And I suppose it would be reasonably impressive. I mean, if you're even listening to us, I mean, it's just as a joke, if you're listening to people like the three of us, you're not an idiot. I mean, it's a matter of well understood frustration that you often have to read. What did Lysak say yesterday? You have to read things twice to get 50% of it, right? And so what we do is non-trivial here. Despite someone like Martin's ability to make it accessible. So you're not an idiot, that's for damn sure. But you need to take a real IQ test to see what the correlation is.
And Dan came to our first conference.
Oh, he did. Okay, great.
I think someone asked a question in the chat that's relevant. So he asked, how does pictorial differ from spatial?
So, oh my God. I want to say something really sarcastic. And I'm not going to say it.
Do it.
Let me see what this says about it, so I can say it without saying it sarcastically. See if I can find a way to say this. Have you watched? Here's a way to think about it. Have you watched Survivor, the old Survivor series? I got to find you guys on my picture so I can see you. So in the old Survivor series, there were they would put puzzles out and problems out. And one of the reasons they had to put men and women on the same team and they had to balance them out is because sexes radically differ in the ability to solve different kinds of puzzles and problems. So one of the favorite examples they would have is they would have this little puzzle thing that was made of colors and shapes and stuff, and you would have to move pieces around. Women are way better at that. If you had to move like this giant ball around, right, with teamwork and stuff, men are way better at that. So I think of this that is like Einstein created pictures, but he didn't create models, and that's probably where physics goes wrong. is that he used a bunch of pictures, usually involving trains or elevators, to be able to make it, and he developed a very deep intuition of it using pictures. Whereas someone like Roger, what's his name, Sir Roger
Penrose?
Penrose, he draws pictures, but they're models. And so they're three-dimensional spatial transformations. So you have these two differences, and so you tend to have people with verbal pictorial sense versus physical mechanical sense, or spatial temporal sense. So that generally involves the difference between pattern recognition in colors and shapes and sizes, like what you would expect women who did hunter-gathering to need, and guys who can rotate and make machines and tools in space. And so you see these two differences really obviously, not only in people, but in the sexes. Like the old joke is, how hard it is to find a woman who could run a VCR. It used to be a joke, but there was so much truth to it.
The VCR is not that complicated.
Well, I know, but I'm older than you, so I remember this, right? I remember this. The same thing happened with computers. The same thing was true with cars, and we still have women who can't pump their own gas, right?
That worries me.
Right. So, and we wonder why women can't model at a high scale, right? They can only experience.
Yeah, as a funny corollary, I have to explain to my wife how does a ratchet actually works. Like the fact that it can turn in one direction and then in the other direction it just clicks. I don't think she still gets it.
Right.
I still don't think she gets it. It was like, this is a pretty fundamental tool. And the very act that I could, use power tools to put together a bed frame seems like magic to her.
Right. Well, that's actually it. Because really what they're saying is that the verbal to pictorial, the reason they're associated is that's exactly what you're trying to do, describe pictures and patterns. And where the spatial temporal is how to manipulate the world. Right? So you have two different things going on, and they're like everything else, they're a division of labor. Right? Normally, it's a division of labor between the sexes. So, you're usually looking at something where you're trying to use verbal communication to cause a picture in the person's mind, versus you're trying to use physical representation or verbal communication to create a model in a person's mind. And so, I forgot what the original question was. Was you there who asked the question?
No, somebody on the chat asked, how does pictorial differ from spatial? I guess, is this correct? Am I correct in thinking that spatial is more about relationships and also in the 3D and sometimes over time, versus pictorial is more of description of like translating a verbal description into something that's more visual?
Right. I mean, exactly. So what you're talking about is that's why empathizing by systematizing isn't enough. I say it's empathizing in time versus systematizing over time. And if you keep adding those properties we continually talk about, you're really talking about the division of labor and time, and basically two different kinds of complexity. So you want to have the joke I used to laugh about my wife is she has to have every fucking condiment in the goddamn world in the refrigerator, right? Like the whole top area is full of all these fucking flavorings, right? I don't know what the hell's in the refrigerator. If I can find the milk and the hamburger, I'm good, right? And the ketchup, I'm good, right? And the same thing with a pantry. I have no idea what's in there, but that's her domain. But she remembers exactly what's in there. And I think that's it. But when it comes to how do we build a fence or put a new roof on or why is this electrical thing not working? Because I had a house built in the 70s, so we had electrical issues now and then. Which okay, how can I? There's clearly a circuit here. Where is the circuit breaking down? Right. That just seems to be very difficult for most women to understand. Not all women, but most women to understand, because it's a temporal model that has to be predicted. It can't be experienced. I don't know how to describe that differently. If I thought about it, I would get better at it. But
Well, I suppose it depends on how you define empathy, but some say that women don't even really have it, they just have projection. And
well, that's what it is. I mean, you're correct.
Don't have what?
empathy, that to understand.
I see what you mean. Most
Variant
of
of
empathy,
another,
like really
that's
understand what other
I'm
people are
like,
feeling. They're just project their own feelings onto others.
Yeah.
But that's. If you think about it, what else can you do?
Right.
Right.
It's not like we're telepathic after all.
Yeah, you have no choice. The question
you can understand from what's conveyed to you.
Correct. So it really depends on how self-absorbed you are versus how how sympathetic and empathic you are to the other person. All right, where are we now? I've lost you guys.
We have just finished question 5.
How did I lose you? Where are you?
Oh, what are you? Oh, you mean the? No, I see your cursor there.
I have the stat. I don't have your picture. Where are you?
Oh, okay, never mind. You mean
there you are.
Lost me
found you.
in your various desktops.
Yes. All right, let's go ahead.
Next question.
Yep.
All right, question 6. What's your take on the global warming question? Is it everything about it bullshit from mainstream media?
From the mainstream media, almost certainly everything. Among scientists, whether self-identified or actual, I just don't know whom to believe. I'm sure we're influencing climate at least slightly. It makes no sense that we wouldn't, but I doubt this has to have catastrophic effects. Either way, it wouldn't imply what it's supposed to imply. In most places, solar and wind energy are still dependent on thermal energy and don't pay off. Migration that it supposedly causes could be solved by not letting people in. And if we were serious about ending CO2 pollution, we'd threaten or outright put total embargo on China and India. It's all just a justification for taking yet more power from white people.
I usually follow Judith, whatever her name is, and she's the best one that I've found, who's the most honest about it. The problem is, okay, so I have relatively deep knowledge of the people involved. As you know, as I've said before, I lost a couple of $1 million on Project 2 Degrees because of the Clintons were involved, and so Hillary owes me $2 million. I'm trying to just get that out there, but they're dishonest.
Good luck getting that back from
her.
her.
Look at that kind of. And I lost I don't know, $500,000, something like that, because I had funded a company that was doing that took over the measurement software for measuring the climate, the software for measuring the climate. And in other words, we were putting together that. So this bunch of people were involved in this. What I found is that imagine the most dishonest, political, corrupt people with the most selfish interest for getting money out of us via scam. that's the kind of people that were involved in this movement. It was, the Clintons are notoriously corrupt but great. Who's the guy that's what's the other guy that
Al Gore.
Gore? He was a nightmare. But the people who ran who I'm not going to name the organizations, but ran the actual organizations that were putting this stuff together, they were just money grubbing politicals like everybody else, like half these people that are in pseudoscience are. Okay. So I have a very low opinion of these people because I've worked with them, right? And Curt, why did you do this? I said, well, it's better for someone like me to be in control of the software than it is for someone like them. And they wanted me to be in control of it because I could finance it. So blah, blah, blah. All right. So what happened, of course, was back in 2009, once I'd made this investment, is it came out they were fudging the data.
Of course they are.
Of course they are. And they were not reporting the contrary data. And so what happened is all the wind went out of the movement. So it turned from global warming as being the term to climate change, right? So that's why they changed it, is because the scientists had invalidated themselves. So this initial self-delegitimization based out of greed is what caused the crisis that's happening. All right. So now let's get into that and go to Judith Curry, who's somebody whose opinion I actually trust because she's deep in the data. And the answer is, yeah, there's warming going on. The question is always the predictive. If you look at their predictions, they go out in a band into the future, right? But the result is always better than their predictions. It's not clear that this is going to accumulate as long as they said, right? It's not going to get as bad as they've said. And it's not clear that it's the only factor involved in this happening. I think most of us agree, most people agree, that humans are having, like Martin said, having an effect on the climate. I don't see how you could not take that from what the data says. The question is it as the disaster that it seems to be? And I remain of the opinion, no, it's not. Until I see something better. Now, Sabina Hassenfelder came out with a video yesterday saying this anomaly is increasing. Well, sure it is. We're also coming to the end of the warm period. Sometime in the next few thousand years, it's going to get cold again. So is that upsetting it? We're certainly not seeing the collapse of the polar ice caps like they predicted so fast. So I'm not positive. I'm not confident that anybody knows anything concretely enough to do much about it. And so until we have unequivocal proof of what's going on and how to solve it, I'm still on the side of nature will solve this problem for us. And I don't believe it's going to result in runaway greenhouse effects. I instead suspect that there will be some minor effect, and like all things, and I don't know if you guys know about this stuff, but all societies go through the same process where they sort of pollute a lot until they get wealthy enough not to pollute. Well, same thing is going to happen in this matter. We're going to have this problem of greenhouse gases, or whatever it is that's causing this warming. We're going to have this problem until it's economically not viable to have the problem. So
Well, I doubt that would happen in India because I see what they're doing to their holy river.
say it again.
So I doubt this will happen in India, seeing as what they are doing to their holy river.
Yeah. All right.
And there's the possibility that more CO2 in the atmosphere will mean more plant growth.
Yes.
I mean, I
So
see this issue as there are really three questions or three aspects that gets all rolled into one, unfortunately, and just
yeah,
call it climate change or global warming, whatever. There's the scientific measurement. There's the actual factual measurement of global temperatures. I mean,
yeah,
you could dispute that there are some data collection method errors and so on, but I think largely, just like you said, this person who's deep in the data have discerned that yes, historically there's been a pattern that we're warming. And there's a question of what's causing that warming, which I don't think anyone really has a definitive answer because how can you, right? It's probably multifaceted, just like everything else. And then there's the question of, well, what are we going to do about it? And it seems like anyone who brings up this topic has a vested interest in grabbing more power and money for themselves, and that has corrupted this whole entire term.
yeah. I mean, look what happened to Germany. They closed their freaking nuclear power plants, and now Russia's caught up. I mean, it was this. Yet France produces so much nuclear power so safely that they have a surplus to sell to the rest of
Yep,
Europe.
yep. And like, unfortunately, the Germans are fucked. They're just defenseless against all this feminine method of lying, and start believing their own shit.
Well, that's the Nazification for you.
Well, yeah.
So I would say we're all, yes, there's warming happening. Yes, humans probably are contributing to it. What's the consequence? I have no fucking idea, and I'm not confident anybody else does. The real answer is that some people are very scared, and because of the state of the world, they grab onto something that they feel can rally around to get their fear in place. And so I think we're seeing that. But until we know better than we know, at least until yesterday, I'm not. I'm not. I think the real issue is population will decrease, energy consumption will increase. We will eventually have to create more nuclear power plants. I mean, I know China's doing it, and because that's the only safe way we have now. And by investing in more nuclear power plants, we'll develop new kinds of nuclear power, and we will use that until we come up with something else.
Or reframe the whole question, sidestep the question, what are we going to do to make this, or essentially hedging our bets, right? Rather than trying to answer, what are we going to do to make this planet habitable
Yep.
for the next several millennia, which I think largely is actually outside of human minds, human hands. What the sun does and a whole bunch of things has far more impact, and it just shows you how how uncontrollable, how powerful nature really is. But we can hedge our bets by becoming interplanetary species.
Yep.
That's what we really should be spending money on.
Correct. All right. Is that it for that one?
Yeah, I think so. All right. Question 7. We're hitting our stride here. Which realistic advice would you give to Latin American policymakers to bring more prosperity to the continent? NLI is gaining a little bit of followers here.
Well, that depends on whether you're willing to do it as a colony of the American Empire or actually want to be sovereign. If the former, just do what Millie does. If the latter, you do what Hitler did and hope for the best.
Okay, so I like to be supportive of South Americans, but the fundamental issue is you're saying what can policymakers do when the problem is the people? And so if your people want subsidy, they want left-leaning governments, then you can't fix that because that's who's going to get into power. If your people want to engage in production and they want to modernize their economies, then then the people will get out there. So I don't know, but the way I look at South America is similar to how I look at Africa, and I'd say, look, I mean, you're doing pretty good right now. They're Catholic. They went to the communist. They had the authoritarian problem, so they went the communist and socialist route. It blew up. It's becoming common sense down there that it blows up. They're in their modernization phase, and you're seeing the countries in South America who work with modernization succeeding at it. And so I don't see any problem there other than time. Uh, you do have a really weird IQ distribution down there, and so and you have the goofy cultural distributions. So it's actually a non-trivial problem. But if you look at it, the IQs are high enough, and the state of development is about high enough that over time you should be able to get there. So I don't know if there's any good advice to give other than if you want to look around the world and see where political and economic experimentation is going on, it's in South America. And so I'm not sure that anybody needs to give South Americans any advice. I think instead that South Americans have become an R&D project to give the rest of us advice. And so I know this is frustrating for South American intellectuals, and yes, we do have a lot of followers in South America. So I mean, I'm sorry, I tend to merge Latin America and South America. It's an American habit. Everything below Texas is South America. Um, but if you look at the progress down there, I don't know what there is to complain about. I mean, what do you expect? I mean, you had the Spanish come in and they preserved what is essentially the feudal system until very late. The feudal system was overthrown by essentially the communist socialist movement, and that was a way to get rid of the government. Excuse me, get rid of the feudal system, but all it did was replace it with a familial feudal system, with a political feudal system, and it was not to your benefit. And so the South has largely given up on this. And so I don't know. I mean, I see things going in the right direction, but you can't fix it without, it's like science evolves with tombstones, so do economies. And that's really the problem that you're facing down there. And I don't know if anybody would disagree with me on that.
But whose tombstones?
It's just in general. I mean, the population. It's like what you're seeing in what you're seeing in Islam right now is the younger people are because of these fucking phones. I mean, it's having a profound effect on them. And so it's minds change, right? When minds change at one rate, which is the younger people, and the older people who are still living in the past, right? They're trying to hold on to it because that's all they know and that's all they can do. So I expect that things keep going well in the right direction down there. I mean, Mexico's the tough one because anyway, Latin America has a problem with the cartels, and because of cartels they have a problem with the government. But I mean, and because they have a problem with the government, they have a problem with infrastructure necessary to ameliorate poverty. And but so example, Mexico needs railroads badly. It doesn't have them. If it has railroads, then they can have more trade distributed around. Because it's not like America, where we have this sort of green field east of the Mississippi. It's actually the territory is quite difficult to get things across. And it's big. And so if you have all the factors, you've got to bring people off the farm, so to speak, which means bring them into a productive economy. You've got to automate or industrialize, and you've got to develop the infrastructure. I can't remember. I think America offered to help build the railroads. Can't remember.
Even though America hasn't really built any railroads for a while.
Because we don't use them.
Well, true.
We do for very heavy commodities. So I don't see an issue with. I don't know what advice to give because I don't see a problem, because I don't see a cognitive problem. If you have a cognitive problem, like you think socialism is going to save you or Marx communism is going to save you, that you have to kill the idea to change.
I think people sometimes go for that because they see it as an alternative to globalism. But if you really want an alternative to globalism, then it has to be right-wing authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Leftism is not gonna work anywhere.
Well, I don't. If somebody were, well, the problem with right-wing authoritarianism is right-wing authoritarianism that actually moves things, or like the Germans did, was it right thing that which is just another extraction cult. I mean, if you're just getting in another set of authoritarians, but if you're getting what you mean, right-wing authoritarianism, which is a developmental authoritarianism.
Yeah. If it's not actually improving the people, then I don't see that as right-wing.
Right-wing, yes. Okay, you're right. All right.
Oh, we actually might have time for one more. Shall we?
Yeah.
It'll break our record. Because in the past, the most we've done is 7 questions. Today, question number 8. Please deliberate. What is the opinion of the NLI on Robert Sepper's, I probably butchered the last name, our argument against the standard out-of-Africa model of the geographic origin and early migration of anatomically modern humans? The standard model proposes a single origin of Homo sapiens in Africa, which then allegedly populated the rest of the world by replacing all other hominids and mutating or evolving into the various races that comprise modern-day humanity. Sepper argues that this hypothesis has run into problems in light of recent genomic sequencing, as well as ongoing gaps, i.e. missing links in the fossil record. Is it possible Europeans and Africans do not actually share the same ancestral origin?
Answer from April 12th in general on the alternatives to out of Africa. It's a reflexive denial of everything mainstream, especially anything that's politically used, because leftist ideologues invoke the theory to claim we're all the same and we just need quintillion Africans in our countries. The response is to deny the premise of that claim. Of course, you don't need to do that because that implication doesn't follow, and you can likewise respond like James Santagata that we didn't do anything wrong in African colonization, we were just coming back home.
They just what?
It's weird.
We're just coming home. Go love,
making
James.
the second time, that's okay. I don't know what separating particular says and haven't seen the studies, but the general trend of that crowd is to deny anything mainstream, so I don't feel the need to make that investment. I may, of course, be wrong one of those days. So to the last question, Europeans and African not actually sharing the same ancestral origin, that doesn't make any sense. At most, you could move it further back.
Yes. So, Martin's, I love your clarity on this subject, Martin. So here's what's happening is in order to get attention, there's a bunch of people in the anthropology and in anthropological genetics. I can't remember how you say it, right? In genetic anthropology. And what they're saying is that there's more gene flow back and forth in pre-fully modern humans, which is 80,000 years ago. There's more back and forth gene flow than we had previously understood. Yeah, there's more back and forth gene flow. That doesn't change the fact that all the evidence says what's called the full package. And I mean, hopefully, I don't know what order we're going to produce the history book in, Martin. I don't the book because we've written this thing, but it's I don't know when we're going to publish that one because everything else seems to be more important. But what they call the full package, which is the ability to use all these tools, fishing nets, and that kind of stuff. Fishing and all that stuff. That seems to take place, 70s, 80, 170, 60, 80,000 years or so, depending on what you're talking about. And the migration path for humans, each of them, the one that goes down along the coasts and ends up in Australia, the one that goes up into Southeast Asia, the one that goes up through India and up in Tibet and then ends up in East Asia, the one that goes up from the dry Persian Gulf up into the Caucasus, the one that goes in an arc over and spreads across what we call the Middle East, and then the one that eventually makes it up into Europe. We know each of these paths, and the genetic continuity is correct. And so I think it's very easy to be misled by the science that says, yes, there was more back and forth gene flow. The difference is we can measure it, right? And so the dominant gene flow is at least 2 generations out of Africa. And a pretty predictable distribution of the genome around the world. Does that mean we didn't interact with Neanderthals or Denisovans or what's the earlier version? Anyway, we haven't interacted with the other humans out there? No, because I mean, if you can find guys screwing sheep, monkeys, and tailpipes and holes in trees, human adaptability, especially from the male side, appears to be extremely exploratory and opportunistic at every level. Otherwise, we'd have speciated faster than we did by into the races. We're adapting to different locations.
Wait,
so
did you just imply that man basically should test reality by seeing what they can screw to get an offspring?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just bizarre to me. So of course there's been some gene flow, but it's not meaningful. Like it appears like the gene flow we got in Neanderthals that's preserving is mostly immune system related. And so there's no I can't find any evidence that's contrary to this, but it's not the difference is whether it's meaningful. So what the flip side argument would be to make that before Homo sapiens, right? The different human groups that were proto-human groups um, that were out there, they did adapt to local circumstances. But I mean, there's no evidence. And sure, there's a little evidence of back and forth gene flow out of Africa, but it doesn't alter the fact that the full package, right? The fully modern package, human package, came together in East Africa. Doesn't alter that. And frankly, I think it's more insightful to listen to what Martin said, which is more of the weird tendency of the right to purity spiral on all sorts of things, which is just bizarre to me. I mean, I can understand it. I can't understand not overcoming it. All right, what else?
Well, we're at time.
Oh.
Actually, I think next question should be a simple one. So question 9. Would the NLI consider backing up your YouTube content and do your Q&A live streams on rumble.com? Why only host on a hostile platform like YouTube?
Odyssey is the only one where we actually got automatic re-uploading from it to work. So that's the one we have.
Now, am I wrong, Martin? But I got a message from Odyssey the other day, so they're going to stop it. They're going to stop automatically importing from YouTube. So
that's to me.
What?
That's news to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's news to me too. I mean, I forgot about it until this question came up, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's their gig. I know we've had problems with it with everybody. So I suppose that we'll have to manually upload to the different sites. I don't consider YouTube hostile to us, do you guys?
Well, they haven't banned us.
We've only had one warning. And it's because I was screwing around, joking about spanking a waitress or something, right? And that it wasn't to do with our work at all.
I think knowing how these companies work, they really have to go out of the way in the bureaucracy in order to specifically target a channel.
Oh, I just checked and it stopped uploading a month ago.
Ooh.
Okay.
Odyssey.
Okay. So I suppose we should. I mean, I keep backups all over the place, but I suppose that it wouldn't hurt us to double it. The thing is, it's a pain in the ass. It really is. Is there? I suppose there's got to be something to automate it, isn't there? Shouldn't there be some way to automate it?
Like what of the YouTube backup?
No, automate it to upload to. In other words, there's got to be a way to automate an upload to Odyssey and Rumble and that kind of crap, right? I got to think there's got to be one. I'll look into it and see what we find.
Well, there was supposed to be BitChute, but we never got that working.
Yep.
I don't think BitChute matters anymore.
Yeah.
I think we tried it for Rumble and didn't get it working.
Odyssey worked. I was pretty happy with that. But what's the other one we should be on? Odyssey and Rumble? Is it Rumble we should be on?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So actually, we did break the record. 9 questions answered. And with that, we've actually caught up on our backlog. So the holiday encore of once every
Friday.
week that we're done, and we're back to the bi-weekly schedule from now on. So the next one will be on the 17th of the month, I think. Yes. And Curt, would you like to do the outro?
All right. So thank you, everyone, for watching. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. Again, the link to proposed questions is below. Apparently, you've caught up. We've only got how many?
We now have 5 left in the backlog.
There are already 2 more in the table.
Oh, okay. All right. So 7.
All right. So please leave your questions in the link. Go to the link below. Please leave your questions. It's always a joy. For my partners in crime here, thank you. I always love working with you guys. And for the audience, thank you for your time and attention.